Hi, you're listening to The Business of Longevity, a podcast exploring the future of the health industry. I'm your host, Oskar Moore, and I build strategy for several longevity companies such as the global functional medicine company Nordic Laboratories and the Danish nutrition brand Functional Future. Each other week, I'll sit down with pioneers who through their business endeavors are shaping how we live longer and healthier lives. From founders to CEOs to investors, all building the next generation of health companies. We'll unpack real business strategies and explore the experiences they've encountered along the way. Each episode is going to explore the vision, the science, the strategy, and the grit behind building the future of health. So welcome to the business of longevity.
In the 90s, supplements were mostly about bodybuilding and sports nutrition. And over the last 2 decades, we've seen protein powder move from the weight rooms to the wellness aisles, and they're embraced by parents, professionals, and everyday consumers. What cultural changes drove that shift, do you think?
I think just an awareness of nutrition and what protein is good for. So lifestyle now is very different from what it was then, and people's perceptions of health have changed. So you can just see that by the number of people that are out running or exercising or going to the gym. And there's an education that has happened over the years where people have a greater appreciation of nutrition generally, but particularly of the importance of protein. So it's become something that everyone is conscious of that they need possibly more of.
Trevor Bolland, welcome to the Business of Longevity. Our first guest, and it means a lot to me that you are our first guest, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. If someone's hearing about Nuzest for the first time, what's the simplest way to explain who you are and what your product portfolio looks like?
Okay, well, we're a supplement company, obviously, and our focus is really on providing essential nutrients to help people maximize or optimize their health and vitality. So we try to fill the gaps by providing products that people can trust and that they're easy to take.
Fantastic. So, Trevor, every time we see each other, I think I say thank you, because when I was in my late teens, you opened up your business to a very young man, which in this case was myself, and invited me to try and build the Scandinavian market and be part of understanding the Scandinavian market, which was very exciting for a young man like myself that was very interested in health and at the same time what I would call fast-moving consumer goods within the health space. And you invited me to fly over to LA, to Anaheim, to the big Expo West, and I got to experience something that I'll never forget, which was seeing big halls and lines of brands within this health space. And I still use some of that imagery in my head today when I try and think of brand awareness and how to build a brand. So I'm forever grateful, and I hope that I am I want to take that with me and give it to the next generation. And I hope that I'm already doing that in my own little way. And when I grow and when the business stuff that I do, I'll definitely be thinking of what you did for me. And I look forward to giving that to the next person. So we already know each other a little bit, and I know a lot about Nuzest, and I always have the big one at home, and never anything under a kilo. So what I think the listeners are interested in is how everything started. So take me back to the moment when Nuzest began. Like, I know Monique is a very important figure in Nuzest and the founding of Nuzest, but where were you in your life and Monique at that time, and what pushed you to start this journey?
Look, it germinated from the fact that Monique was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So that was a bit of a shock for us, for our family. And of course, our total focus in life changed. You know, there was fear, there was anxiety, there was anger, there was sorrow, there was all sorts of sadness, all sorts of things, emotions that came from that. But when we spoke with her neurologist, remembering this was over 20 years ago, so things were very different then, he said there was no hope and that within the next 5 or 6 years, she was going to be in a wheelchair because she did have a very aggressive form. I refused to accept that and then went on a journey that resulted in nutrition being part of the solution to manage an autoimmune disease. So lifestyle in general, but nutrition was an important component of it. And out of that came a search for nutrients that would support someone like Monique, and particularly for her. Eventually, through all the people that we met, because we met some fantastic people along the way, some incredible PhD scientists, neurologists, doctors, naturopaths, all sorts of people. And we came to appreciate what nutrition was and how important it was. And therefore, we went on the search for the ideal nutrition. We started off with suitcases full of tablets and capsules. And I mean, literally, we'd come back from the US with a suitcase full, and eventually discovered that, there are other forms, multi-nutrients around, and we wanted to find the best. So I also went back and consulted a lot of these people and used some of the products that we had found to say, how can we improve that to make this the ideal solution for my daughter? So we weren't setting out to make a business. I was trying to find a solution to help Monique manage her multiple sclerosis. And out of that came a product, and people then said, we could sell this product, and then it became a business. But I didn't start out to create a business. Happened.
It's such a beautiful story, and I think that's what something like Nuzest and its brand, why the brand is so strong, is because it's built on something much bigger than a business. It's built on the power of those feelings that you guys went through and the need to find a better solution. And I think that's what drives a lot of people in this industry. And I think that's what really differs between successful businesses and the ones that are just out there to make a quick buck. So it's a very, very nice story. And I can concur with working with also one's family adds extra value. And Monique is now a co-founder or is a co-founder of Nuzest
and the brand, yes.
And works in the company and has done since the founding of the company in 2012. So it's fantastic. If we move on a little bit, so we look a little bit into the business and the journey you've been on. Can you remember that first big validation moment where you thought, okay, this is actually going to work?
The business or nutrition?
Nuzest. So I would say the business perspective of it. When did you see that, okay, customers are really picking up on this? We're seeing that revenue starting to come in. We're seeing that production is in order and that we're actually creating a healthy, sustainable business.
Yeah, it was fairly quick, actually. We launched in New Zealand because I'm originally from there, and our key product, Good Green Vitality, was made in Nelson. Our protein came from Belgium. We used to ship it in by the container. We now blend it locally. But when we first launched it, we went to a couple of events, for example, and it's like expos, and it just took off very quickly, remembering that we were very early in the game. So sales just happened. There wasn't any, the thought that this would work, or the realization that this would work, was purely because of the reaction of the people we interacted with. That was all very, very positive and demand very quickly from a very low base. Wow. But we could see that there was a need. People were looking for these sorts of products. So there it was. The market was there. The void just needed to be filled.
So you're talking about this market being there, but when we're looking over the course from 2012 to today, protein powder and the supplement market is one of the toughest, probably most saturated markets out there. And,
yes.
And what business schools would be teaching is a true red ocean market. Yet you've built Nuzest into a global brand. You're now in more than 25 countries, and congratulations on this. Recently on the shelves in Boots and all across the UK. And what listeners and people out there don't always recognize is the grit behind the scenes, the constant battles with regulation, competition, supply chains, manufacturing, and even just the complexity of getting the shipping right. So if you had to point to one thing that in this period Nuzest did differently that explains your survival in this red ocean market, what would that be?
Sheer doggedness, quite honestly. I mean, it's self-funded. We never bought capital in. It's just me. I spent basically everything that I had saved over a long period of working, I put into the business, and just believed in it and continued funding it and supporting it and making sure I had good people around me who were passionate about the brand. And I think that's a big part of it. Most of our team, in fact, all of our team are really passionate about the brand. So they try hard, and that comes across when you're interacting with other people and with consumers and so forth. But we're not big. It sounds like that we're large. We're in a number of countries. We've got a global footprint, but we're not large. We're still a small family business in reality compared to these large companies that are out there now. You talked about the saturation of the market now. That has happened very quickly. It wasn't saturated, 15, 16 years ago. It definitely was not. It was in its infancy. Our plant-based protein, for example, we were one of 4 or 5 plant-based proteins in the market. There were a couple of big ones before us, and they still have dominant market share. But it was new, so there wasn't that competition. It's much harder now for someone to get to the point where we are now. Starting in the current market would be a lot harder and cost a lot more money. Yeah.
So you
I
don't
did it
recommend
without any experience. Like
Right.
it was a
Right.
big learning curve.
So one phrase when I was doing my research for this episode was that every ingredient serves a clear purpose for you and your body. This was from your website, and this intrigues me because I know how much work goes into the sourcing part at Nuzest. And again, the average consumer really does not understand what goes on behind the scenes. So can you share a little on your standards and requirements of the raw material that you insist when you're developing your products?
Well, firstly, we make sure that it's from a trusted source. We rely a lot on our contract manufacturers to help us source the right products. Or the right ingredients. So that's one component. The other component is making sure that it is the right form of ingredient. So if it's a vitamin or mineral, for example, making sure it is a form that works well in the powdered form that we have, and that the body can absorb that particular form of vitamin or mineral. So there are different forms that are available. Some are expensive, some are not so expensive. So an example would be magnesium, right? Pretty key mineral that everyone knows about. If you want to get a high label claim, you would use magnesium oxide. It's 50% magnesium, but it's about 10% bioabsorbable. So really, it's a bit of a waste of time unless you're having problems going to the bathroom. Then it's a great help. So you're better to look at the science and say what are the most absorbable. Then you'll come to the citrates and the bisglycinates, or what you would call a chelated form of magnesium, which is a much lower magnesium content, but a much more absorbable form. So much better, much more easy for the body to actually take in and use. And that's what we do for each of the ingredients that we have. We make sure in the formula we've got the right form, and then we make sure that the source of that is a reliable source from the supplier. And we do things like identity testing, because how do you know if that's that bit of powder that's been supplied by someone is actually a certain ingredient and not grass clippings?
Right.
So identity testing, and that's becoming pretty standard in the industry. If you're with good quality contract manufacturers, will have this in place. So we've just got to make sure that all those boxes are ticked. And then finally is the testing of the product, of the finished product, to make sure that it's safe in particular.
So this is why I loved speaking to people that are really passionate about health, because it gets a bit geeky when it comes to the supplements and what supplements should be going in and the testing of it. So you mentioned the testing and being transparent with your consumers. Is this important to communicate in your marketing? Do you use it as your unique selling proposition, or do you actually just hide that away because it's not that important because it's more important for you?
Initially it was more important for us to make sure, but now the market has started, consumers are starting to demand those sorts of things, to know that the products have been tested and to ask for results of those tests. So we're pretty open about that. What we do is certainly there is compulsory testing around anyway. So gluten, for example, if you've got a gluten-free claim, in Europe, you have to test every batch to make sure that your claim is correct. So that's something you have to do by regulation, which we do. In other countries, you don't have to actually test. You just make the claim and it's up to you to make sure it's right.
Oh.
But, it's safe microbial levels once it's been produced. It's the gluten element, it's the pesticides, it's the heavy metals. It's all those sort of things to make sure that everything is within tolerance and safe for the consumer. So we do those tests. We make them available if people want them. But many brands are doing that now. Many aren't, of course, but many brands are doing that. That's what the consumers are starting to demand, and fair enough.
So you mentioned heavy metals just then, and I know that many protein powders out there, especially the cheap protein powders that you can pick up on the shelf in any dodgy supermarket, has a lot of heavy metals when they are tested. So what is it that your pea protein, to pull that up again, does differently to reduce the amount of heavy metals that are in it?
Well, it's all dependent on firstly the environment in which the peas are grown, because all plants have heavy metals. The soil has heavy metals in them. So if you're growing in soil that is contaminated with heavy metals, your raw material or your product is going to have it. The irony is that if you go to the vegetables in a grocery store, you're more likely to get more heavy metal contamination there than you are in a product that's been isolated from the source, which is the pea protein, for example. But all of our peas are sourced in northern France. They're all grown in northern France in a particular region. The company that we use to do the isolation process, they are very, very careful with their quality control. They provide the seeds to the farmers. It's all made in the right place. They're testing all the time for heavy metals and for pesticides and things like that. So by the time the raw material gets to us for blending, we know that all of that has been done. Yes, we do the finished product as well, because what can happen in a manufacturing process is that there could be further contamination or cross-contamination. So we then do another checks. But any good contract manufacturer or manufacturing facility that has all the right certifications and the ISO qualifications, etc., you're very unlikely to have a problem. But we do the tests anyway. But heavy metals, they're a fact of life, and the consumer there's education required, because people don't understand that when you do analysis, there will be heavy metals present. You cannot avoid it. If you eat food, there are heavy metals. The key is eating food that has not been grown in a contaminated environment.
So to any listeners out there, once again, the quality control behind brands and businesses, it's a big part of how a company is driven, constantly sourcing the right ingredients, testing it, making sure that it lives up to the brand's expectations and the quality that a brand wants to deliver. I think something's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to talking about this now, because Good Green Vitality was one of your staple products. It's one of your first products that you came out with back then. I believe it was called Good Green Stuff. It was,
yes, it was.
In Europe when I was selling it. And I kind of remember my sales pitch, because it was over 75 vitamins and minerals. This was when I was doing it around 2017, and people found it interesting that you could be taking a powder in a drink that tastes reasonably well, and get all of this supplementation in there. And today, AG1, which is also out of the region that you're in, is it from New Zealand as well, Trevor?
Yeah. Yes, New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
come from the same area.
Hmm.
And they have really built massive momentum through branding and storytelling. So I'm really intrigued to hear because I know how good quality this is, and I've never actually taken AG1 because I've always been on this. But what's the hardest part about competing with a brand that's driven so strongly by marketing? And how have you differentiated your strategy around that? Because you must be doing something different because you can't be spending that amount of capital on getting out to every single individual in the world.
Well, we're firstly nowhere near the size of AG1. And we don't have that sort of budget. So they've built their brand on being able to. Firstly, they had the right connections in terms of influencers, and they had an influencer who got them going in a big way that enabled them to raise significant amounts of capital, and it then became a marketing exercise. Really. Is it a good product? I used to know the formula very, very well. I don't know exactly what the formula is now because they've still got these proprietary blends sitting in there. I assume it's okay. The vitamin and mineral content is good, but all the other bits of it, I'm not sure of because the amounts are unclear. But yeah, it did come out of the same region. In fact, the two products originally were exactly the same.
Interesting.
So good green stuff was originally called Athletic Greens in the United States because we couldn't register the name Good Green Stuff in the US. So that's about all I can say on that subject.
No, it's good. Based on the AG1 marketing strategy, a lot of stuff is popping up locally in Europe, whereby brands are trying to copy that strategy, but in a more local areas where they can pick up on quick sales because it's local. So there's a lot of this stuff going out there, and I don't know how it is when you see them on the shelves, but I don't see a lot of this on shelves. I see it a lot on direct to consumer websites, so e-commerce platforms. But you guys managed to get into a lot of supermarket chains with this stuff, don't you?
We're in a lot of the independent health food stores, not so much the chains. We are in supermarket chains in New Zealand with that product. We have, I don't know if Boots have got that on shelf or just in their online store. I'm not sure. Right. But we are in a number of, certainly the independents like Whole Food Markets in the UK, Planet Organic, Revital, all of those niche chains that are especially around the London area. We're in all of those with Good Green Vitality. But it is not. It's not really a fast-moving consumer product that is in your typical grocery store. There are multi-nutrient products in those stores, but they tend to be lower cost. I'm not saying they're poor products, but they're not at the same level as ours in terms of the quality of the forms of the ingredients, which are the expensive forms versus the inexpensive forms, and the sheer number of those to actually give you the synergistic effect that we're looking for in the product.
Right. That's something we hope that in 5 years' time that changes. So supermarkets and big supermarket chains are changing what's on the shelves, and premium products that might not be fast moving today still have space on the shelves because it's important that consumers have the opportunity to pick up and feel a product like this and put it in their basket and bring it home.
Yeah. It's interesting. It is. Look, it is changing. I mean, in New Zealand, for example, in certain areas, the managers and owners of the grocery stores love having us in there because the value of their basket doubles just by putting it in there. So,
Yeah, exactly. exactly.
But yeah, it is changing. Supermarkets are trying to embrace this, and at the expense of health food stores. Unfortunately, there's a lot of independents just aren't surviving.
Yeah, but that's also because of the online presence that a lot of
Yes,
shops have.
yes,
And I know
yes.
from ourselves, a small little brand in Denmark, Functional Future, where we focus so much on advertising online, which means that the consumers come through our web shop
Yeah.
much more because they're sitting at home on the couch and scrolling Instagram, and then they, oh yeah, I've got to buy my collagen powder or whatever it is that they're looking for. So I'm going to move on a little bit and maybe challenge you, and I'm sure you have a good answer here, but I like to look at brands and try and quickly identify their consumer base. So what's the average consumer? And when I go through Nuzest social media and your website, etc., you've got young men that are focused on fitness, but also parents and families and females doing yoga or a bit older, which is for me really broad. And does this kind of wide appeal make marketing more challenging, or is it just because you have different segments that you want to focus on?
Look, it's it's a bit of trial and error, to tell you the truth, but the reality is the products were designed to be suitable for everyone. You know, young people, old people, people that are health conscious, people that are not well, athletes, you name it. They're suitable for everyone because the the research has validated the fact that our global populations are deficient in a whole range of nutrients and vitamins and minerals through a whole lot of reasons, from soil depletion to too much processed food to the stresses of our modern lifestyle demanding more nutrition, etc. So we know that there's a deficiency, and that applies to almost everyone. So who's your market? And yes, you're right. We've got a whole range of people. It's difficult for us to know where to target because we have athletes, we have older people, we have active lifestyle people, but generally our market is probably the 30 plus, even the 35 plus market more predominantly, and they are already health conscious and reasonably well educated in terms of nutrition. That is where it sits. How do we target that? It's difficult because it's still a number of different segments. Do we go for the female segment? Do we go for the older 50 plus segment? And it all requires different marketing. And I guess having not been in this business, my background isn't marketing and production at all. It's been a long and expensive learning curve to get to where we are.
I am a little bit curious because in this question and the answer, we are not talking at all about a big vegan presence that there must be there because you have vegan protein powder. Is
Yeah.
that even important for you that it's a vegan protein powder, or for you is it just about creating the best protein powder?
It was about making sure that the products were available to everyone.
Right.
And in doing that, they became, we tried to make sure they were also suitable for vegans. We prefer to say plant-based today. I mean, and there's a number of reasons for it. There's plenty of research been done now on pea protein isolate versus whey. There is really very little between them in terms of the primary effect on muscle growth, for example, which is the main thing that people understand protein is for. Amino acids are amino acids, right? And pea protein isolate has all 9 essential amino acids. In some of them, they're greater than in whey, and some of them they're less. What it does, though, it's the plant-based. It's more friendly to the environment. That's one thing. It's suitable for everyone. It's a sustainable product. Peas put nitrogen back into the soil. We don't need to. So it's uses less water and than any of the other protein forms, even plant protein forms. So what we did was we chose what we thought was an environmentally responsible but just as efficacious form of protein that would suit everyone. And in particular, what it does with many people is that it's much easier on the gut. So if someone is lactose intolerant, or they have problem with it, do you find a lot of bloating with a lot of proteins? I don't have a problem with whey protein or with milk myself. So it's not that I'm against that at all. It's quite the opposite. But I just know for the majority of people, the plant base will actually be more benign in terms of its digestibility. In terms of the market, though, the whey protein outweighs plant-based protein by a country mile.
Absolutely.
And is growing faster.
Yeah. So moving on, because I'm quite interested in this raising funds versus not raising funds. And
Yeah.
you know my parents very well as well. And I've grown up in a always hearing that we are very focused on growing organic businesses, and that's the way I've grown up. But now I'm very intrigued in companies that do raise funds, and I always listen and try and learn, why did you raise funds and does it make any sense? So I know you haven't raised any funds for Nuzest, but have you, if you step back for a second and think a little bit through it, if you had taken funds earlier on, would that have helped you guys achieve more, or rather achieved quicker results, do you think?
Depends on who you get the funds from. So if you're getting funds from someone who can actually add value to your business, then I think it's a very smart thing to do. So in hindsight, would I have raised some capital early on if I knew what I was doing? Yes, I probably would have, because we would have gone a lot further and a lot faster than we are right now. Bearing in mind that, my objective was not business related. Now, a lot of this fundraising that you see going on today, people have an idea, they're jumping onto the bandwagon, they're raising money, they're not using their own capital. They've even got seed capital to start with. So they've got the idea, but there's no skin in the game. And the whole objective is to raise money, grow fast, sell out and go. That's a very different objective to where we started and why we started our business. So it really depends on your objective in raising that capital.
Exactly. And I think that's some really good points around who is investing and what capital you're bringing in. I keep, when we're talking about the subsidiaries that we have and the ones that I work in, it's always about they have to add value. It's not just coming in with the capital, because capital is great, but unless you have someone who shares that vision and wants to open up some doors and help the business grow as well, it becomes, it has the opportunity to excel the business, but I think it becomes a distance between the capital in some way and the founder's vision and the objectives that are there.
Yeah. It can have the opposite effect on your business because the investor's sole purpose may be to grow as fast as he can and get his money out. And so the brand principles will be overridden if that particular investor has the power to do so.
Yeah.
And then that destroys the whole purpose of what you're trying to create. And that's happened on many occasions.
But I understand the interest that is there from a young founder, because the valuations when focusing on the longevity industry, the health industry at the moment, are just so high, and you can really raise a lot of capital because big private equity groups and VCs are looking this way. They're looking into health, they're looking into longevity, and I on a weekly basis, I have conversations with these types of groups, and they're very aggressive. So I understand that it can tickle some people to get going with quick capital, but sometimes the value of the company and the value-driven business loses its effect because they want to quickly exit after 5 years, or they want to take over majority of the company, and it's just a conundrum that I'm sitting with every day, which is, what's the right way to do things, and can you excel things, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Look, Oscar, you just have to be sure of what you're trying to achieve, what you want to achieve. And then if you need more capital to achieve that, you make sure you get it from the right investor.
Right.
It's that simple, and that you've got the agreement down and in writing in terms of what they can and they can't do,
Yeah.
so that you can achieve the objective.
But that's it. As simple as you say it is, it's also you only get to meet this investor a handful of times before you go into a partnership, and it's first really the long journey on the other side
Yeah.
where you find out, and it's
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. But
Yeah.
let's move on a little bit, because now we're moving towards the end of this, and I'm
Mhm.
interested to hear what what you want to achieve with Nuzest, because from the outside I'm seeing Nuzest grow. I
Yeah.
hear you saying that you're not that big, but you are growing, and your presence is much bigger, and I'm always happy to see people purchasing Nuzest here in Denmark, because I know the quality of the product, but I know you guys are so passionate around it as well. But what is it you want to achieve with this, and what is there an end goal at some point?
It's a good question, Oscar, and I actually am trying to answer it myself. I turn 71 next month, so I'm very conscious of longevity. So it will depend very much on whether or not my daughter wants to continue with this business. And also I've got some key staff members in different places in the world who have all contributed to where we are. So I'm conscious of what they want to do and where they want to get to as well. Um, it, it's, it, it could be that everyone wants to get to a certain revenue target and sell out and go their own way. I mean, I'm not going to be around. So for me, the objective is not to grow it over the next 5 years and sell out for a mozza, because I wouldn't know what to do with the money at, approaching 80, buy a new wheelchair maybe.
Well, you don't look at Trevor. You always look sharp. You always have done, and you still
Yeah,
do.
yeah. So it's a bit of a different position because of my age, I think. So it really much is dependent on my daughter, and I'm not sure if she wants to run the company. She's a mum. She's got other priorities. She loves the business, but I'm not sure if she wants the stress of running the business, or she might want to still own the business and have someone else running it. We've got a good team here. It can keep going. So look, I can't give you a definitive answer, Oscar, because I'm not sure at this stage. We probably will get some more capital if we want to grow. We'll probably go out and look for some more capital.
Interesting.
I've put in a lot over the last 15 years, and I need enough to actually buy my food for the rest of my life.
Getting expensive. Healthy
Yeah,
food is
that's getting
getting
expensive.
expensive.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think it's another interesting question, because I sit with it often with the founders that I am involved in, which is, where do you
Yeah.
want to go? What's the vision? What is it? We can go so many different routes, but we need to understand on where do we actually want the end to be, and if the end is just, let's see how far we can go, that's a strategy as well. But there's so many people involved, and they have so many thoughts, and trying to find that aligned strategy can sometimes be difficult. So I think a lot of companies are sitting in the exact same position to say, what is it we really want to do with this, and achieve with it in the end? But the journey is
For
always,
family, yeah. For family companies, it's like you're in. It's
yeah.
very much up to the next generation. So you and your brother are the ones that are going to have to make that decision.
We already have the discussions on how do we want this to look, and what
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of
sure you do.
what kind of goals do we have, and so on. So it's lots of fun, but it also takes a lot of think process.
Yeah.
So to wrap this off, you've had some experience now in this market, and if you were to meet a young person who is interested in building or starting something in this longevity business space, what's the number one recommendation?
Look, I would tell them to think very carefully before going ahead. And the reason is because firstly, it is a saturated market, as you've said. So unless they have already got the resource, it will be a hell of a struggle to break in. You can see it now. There are brands starting every day.
Yeah.
And, they all have visions of making it big, and some of them will, but it'll be a small percentage. The second thing I would caution people about is that any business that requires production of product is very tough on working capital. It's just an ever-growing cycle. As you grow, you need more product. Therefore, you need to spend more money on production. And so cash flow is very, very difficult. And there's also risks associated with production where you have products that have a shelf life. So the inherent risks of this type of business are quite formidable. And unless you've had a lot of experience in business already and you've got the right advisors around you in terms of production and distribution, it is a hell of a learning curve. So I would caution someone that just has the idea and thinks they can do it, because it's not easy.
I think you're pulling up some of the key struggles that many businesses do have, especially production companies.
Yeah.
It's difficult to be driving profits every month because you have big bills you need to be paying, and the cash flow issues do arise. So my final question, Trevor, because I did mention that you look great and you always have done. So what's your number one health hack that you do yourself?
The health hack. Look, it's mainly physical exercise for me. I enjoy it, so it's not a burden for me. So for many people, it's a burden; they can't get into it. But I love my exercise. Always have done my whole life. I'm a very keen cyclist. Just come back from 10 days cycling in Mallorca, which was absolutely fantastic. And I think that the key is to keep doing it. Like, at your age, a lot of people your age, they stop. They've gone through school or university, they've been playing sport, then all of a sudden they get into business and they stop. The key is not to stop, because it's so much harder. The older you get, the harder it is to get back into it. So the key is, for me, is to embrace exercise as part of your everyday lifestyle and be disciplined enough to do it however many times a week you can. But to find something that you're passionate about that involves exercise, because just exercise for the sake of exercise is boring.
That's my problem.
Me, anyway.
That's my problem. I love golf, and it's just walking, and I don't get but at least I walk a lot. I never do the buggy. I always walk. Trevor, it's been a pleasure having you on the Business of Longevity podcast. Thank you very much for being the first guest. And if anyone wants to know more about Nuzest, it's nuzest.com, or jump onto Nuzest's Instagram and you can see a few photos of Trevor doing his cycling, which is great. All the best.
I'm not photoshopped yet.
All the best, Trevor. Bye.
Thank you, Oskar. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
That was the Business of Longevity. I'm Oskar. Thank you for being part of shaping a healthier future through businesses and brands that truly make a difference. If this episode gave you a new perspective on what it takes to build a longevity company, share it with someone who should hear it. I'll see you in the next episode.